Frenchman was the first one that came up with this idea of social Darwinism. His name was Gobineau. I don't know, he was kind of being an academic. But there was an Englishman named Houston Chamberlain who took this up with a vengeance. And he was propagating this, that all humans are not equal, because all human races are not equal. Some have evolved more than others. And for some reason, even in the 19th century, Darwin's idea of evolution was more popular in Germany than it was in England. And it continued into the 20th century. This fellow, his name was Houston Chamberlain, not Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Munich fame, but Houston Chamberlain. He eventually went to Germany, and he was a hero. And I have a book written by an Englishman named Paul Johnson, a history book called Modern Times, and in it, Paul Johnson says that when Houston Chamberlain was on his dying bed, there on his deathbed there in Germany, Hitler went and he kissed his hands. Real symbolism, huh? There was a debt that the German people owed to this Houston Chamberlain. And so that is this idea that there was not a single human race, but independent human races. It was hard to factor in with Paul's words. Through one man, sin entered into the world, and through sin, death. So what happened was, and that takes us back to the very beginning where you had that word hermeneutic. Paul says when we are dealing with the Word of God, we're supposed to take it as it is, not start reading into it all sorts of things. Now, here it is. It is important to remember that the task of interpretation, of hermeneutics, is to try to understand and extricate, while respecting the word expressed, the sense conveyed by a text, and not to recreate in some fashion. Now, what was the recreation? Well, there was a Dutch Jesuit named Schoenberg, and he came up with this. There is something we can talk about. Original sin that influences us, inclines us more easily to do wrong, and makes it harder for us to do good. See, this planet, think of it like a boat that's been out in the salt water for a long time. What happens? Layer after layer after layer of barnacles builds up, huh? Not just one layer of barnacles. More and more and more layers and layers and layers. And so, you see, there have been generation after generation of human beings inhabiting this planet, doing lots of bad things, and this planet is sort of like morally polluted. And so when we are born into this morally polluted planet, we are it impinges on us and makes it hard for us to do good and to avoid evil. So that was the rewording. I mean, that was the reinterpretation. Yeah, there is original sin, but, well, you see that? You start playing around with things like that, and everything starts collapsing like a house of cards. Guess what? Science has disproven that stuff about the separate human races. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Right. Along came DNA. Some people got together and they took DNA samples from population groups all over the world, compared them, and the similarities are so great that the inescapable conclusion was all existing peoples today, no matter what population group they belong to, go back to the single source. So, latter-day science has disproven the earlier supposed science that was at the root of this reinterpretation of original sin. Because you see, that fits in with something that has been particularly harmful in the modern world. Go back to the 1700s. One of the infamous progenitors of the French Revolution was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Mm-hmm. Now, Rousseau's position was that human beings are really perfect and perfectible, but the culture, the structures of the culture are so bad that culture deforms a person. And so, what's the solution? The solution is change the world. The problem isn't inside of us. The problem isn't inside of us. The problem is outside of us. And that's what led to the French Revolution. We got to turn things upside down. And it makes it very easy then, and this, I think, contributes somewhat after the Second Vatican Council to a lot of people becoming socially active. Look, some of you may have heard the definition of liberalism, and I came across once. What liberalism is about is to make the world so perfect that nobody has to be good. Think about it. Mm-hmm. See, that was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. If we have a perfect world, we have perfect people. Huh? Because this world is so messed up. Well, people are messed up. So you can't expect people to take themselves in hand, can you? No. What we have to do is turn everything up outside of ourselves upside down. And that's the danger of this sort of thinking, when you start reinterpreting original sin in the way I was just talking about. This polluted planet, we don't have to work on ourselves. Huh? All we have to do is get busy, and change the world, and then there will be no problems. You know, all of us admire Mother Teresa and the Missionaries of Charity, don't we? I'm very, very close to them. For a while, I'm in a confessor here. I go every other week to give them a conference, etc. You know, not all American nuns are happy about it. They're not, let me put it like this, they're not in sympathy. Because so many people here in this country instinctively admire the Missionaries of Charity. And they talk them up. Well, there's some American sisters, they come back with, well, what they're doing is they're taking care of the victims. They're taking care of the people who have been damaged by this bad, bad world. We're working on the root causes. Namely, these other sisters, this community, see, their priority is on social change. Get it? Mm-hmm. That's the danger when you start emphasizing the problem. The core is outside of ourselves and not within ourselves. And this has been a problem that's been serious ever since the days of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And we have practical denials of this all the time. All the time. Do you remember a few years ago, up in South Dakota, there was this young Catholic officer. He was in the missiles, and they had to go on duty. He'd go down underground, and they spend 24 hours there. Now, he was a young fellow, married, one child. He and a single errant woman were ordered to go down there to be the pair on duty. He didn't think it was a good idea. You know, for the two of them in these close quarters to be there. Now, if we're angels, there's no problem, huh? But if there's a problem inside ourselves, what do you think his wife was thinking, huh? You know what his wife was thinking? Get him, boy, get him, tell him. And he was threatened with all kinds of punishment and all. Remember that? Well, he was acting in sync with reality. What happens is these people in positions of authority or military and so on, they try to finesse things by using a certain word, professional. They should be professional. They should be professional. In other words, you become like a lump of coal. You're no longer flesh and blood. But notice, this term gets used over and over and over to evade the reality that there is something wrong in ourselves. And so much of our country today, institutions of all sorts, is operating on the premise that there is no problem inside ourselves. And